the 25th of May 2020, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, George Floyd, an African American man, was killed by a Minnesota police officer whilst in police custody. The consequences of his death have been resounding and spread not just across Minnesota, but worldwide. There have been protests in all US states, as well as over 400 cities across the world. Floyd's death has led to many people across all walks of life to open their eyes to the worldwide pandemic, that is, racism, which has manifested itself in politics, in workplaces, and in sports. One of these areas of manifestation is football. Football, the most watched and played sport globally by a long way, has a huge sphere of influence not just in politics, but shaping the judgment and viewpoints of billions of people who watch the beautiful game. In the German Bundesliga, English international Jadon Sancho paid tribute to the late Floyd by taking off his shirt after scoring his first of 3 against SC Paderborn, revealing an undershirt with the words, "Justice for George Floyd." Sancho was reprimanded for his celebration with a yellow card, as it is FIFA protocol to book players for removing their shirt. However, Sancho, nor any other Bundesliga players will be reprimanded for their anti-racism messages, Rainer Koch, head of the German DFB, confirmed, stating that the messages they portray are concurrent with the values associated with the DFB, which is the German Football Association. Other acts of solidarity alike have filtered throughout the major European leagues, from players and clubs alike, with Marcus Thuram taking a knee after scoring against Union Berlin, and all Premier League clubs brandishing the phrase "Black Lives Matter" on the back of their shirts for the first few fixtures back from the COVID-19 enforced break. However, this stance against racism and oppression are not universal throughout football. Tokmak Ngoyin is a South Sudanese footballer who plays for Ferencvaros in the Bulgarian First Division. After scoring against Puskas Academia, he, like Sancho, revealed an undershirt stating "Justice for George Floyd." Unlike Sancho, the consequences of his anti-racism tribute were handled very differently by the Hungarian Football Association. They issued the former refugee a formal letter of reprimand against his actions, in which it states that if Ngoyin was to undertake similar actions in the future, then he would face actual penalties for each occasion, implying either a ban or fine, or potentially both. This incident is yet another example of the inherent nature of racism manifested in football. Since the establishment of association football in 1856, racial incidents have littered the sport for over a century. Take the testimonial of West Bromwich Albion player Len Cantello. Len Cantello was a midfielder who made 301 appearances for West Bromwich Albion between 1969 and 1979, although it would be his last for the club that would become the most infamous. After 10 years of service to the club, he was sold to Bolton Wanderers for £300,000, though before he left the Birmingham-based outfit, he was to be granted a testimonial by the club. On the 15th of May 1979, the infamous Blacks versus Whites game was played at the Hawthorns. Cyril Regis and Laurie Cunningham, 2 West Brom legends, led out a team only composed of black players, against Len Cantello's West Brom 11, comprised of only white players. It is events similar to this that signify the blatant nature of racism within football throughout history. Football in the 20th century was marred by racist incidents not just in England, but across European football and other leagues worldwide. But as football moved away from its roots in synonymous racist behaviour, not just by fans but clubs and associations alike? In a short answer, no. Since the turn of the century, explicit racism has declined, with society becoming more liberalised, and the use of racism being ostracised in certain circles around the world. However, the prevalence of racism within this game is often understated and swept under the carpet as an issue of the past, as a social practice that went down with hooliganism in the 80s and 90s. This is far from the case. Football charity and racism activist group Kick It Out have reported a 22% and 43% rise in racist incidents within English football in 2018 and 2019 respectively. If that isn't enough to convince you that racism is still active and inherent within the beautiful game, in this video I will draw 3 racist incidents from 3 different countries in the last 3 years. Before these are investigated, however, it must be stated that these are by no means the only incidents of racism within football. And if you would like to read the long and disturbing list of racist incidents within football, I will leave a link in the description of a Wikipedia article that contains over 450 references to racism within association football. First, to one of the most prominent racial incidents of 2018, Mesut Ozil's premature international retirement from the German national team after the World Cup in Russia. Ozil is a German footballer of Turkish origin who has 92 caps for the German national team and has played for the likes of Real Madrid and his current club Arsenal, as well as winning the 2014 World Cup with Germany. He is known as a world-class mercurial playmaker within Europe and registered the second most assists in world football between 2010 and 2020, only second to Lionel Messi. However, it was his below-average performance at the 2018 World Cup which sparked the racism experienced by the midfielder. Despite Germany being the holders of the World Cup trophy going into Russia 2018, they were knocked out of the group stage, losing to both Mexico and South Korea. Many of the German players performed at a well below average standard, including captain Manuel Neuer and national team stalwarts Jerome Boateng, Mats Hummels, Marco Reus, Thomas Müller and Toni Kroos, though it was Ozil who faced the most public and media scrutiny after the nation's premature exit from that year's competition. Despite creating 5.5 chances per game, the most in the tournament per match, he was ridiculed on social media and by pundits alike for his performances. These quickly escalated to racial comments and slurs shared online by German supporters, especially in regards to his Turkish heritage. In the wake of this abuse, Ozil announced his international retirement at the meagre age of 29, citing racial abuse by not just the fans, but the German footballing establishment as well. In his announcement, he stated that he was German when we won and Turkish when we lost, believing the German fans and administration alike to only view him as German when he and the team were performing. His fellow Germany and Arsenal teammate, Per Mertesacker, came out and publicly backed Ozil's claims. It was this racism towards Ozil from the fans, the footballing body, and the flag he played under that led to his premature international retirement. He could have played at the Euros next year, the next World Cup in Qatar, and even potentially at the 2024 Euros, in which he would have been 35. But instead, a glistening international career is marred and ruined by the racist actions of others within the sport. Though, this is not the only racist incident that has occurred in international football over the last few years, with a fateful night in Bulgaria having a lasting impact on the shape of football in 2019. On the 14th of October 2019, the English national team travelled to the Vasil Levski National Stadium in Sofia, Bulgaria, to play the Bulgarian national team in Euro 2020 qualifying. The Bulgarian fans only had access to certain sections of the stadium due to racial incidents that occurred in June. But if you were to think that would stop the Bulgaria fans, you would be sorely mistaken. Tyrone Mings, who was playing in his first game for the Three Lions, was the initial target of the Bulgarian fans, who started racist chants and directed monkey noises at the Aston Villa defender. This quickly spread to the other black footballers playing for the Three Lions, in Raheem Sterling and Marcus Rashford. In the 28th minute, the game was stopped due to constant racial abuse, especially that directed towards Sterling. the Bulgarian crowd was warned in accordance with the UEFA regulations, and the game resumed. There was still racist abuse from the stands, but not to the level and volume before the stoppage. However, this small respite for the black English players was short-lived. Raheem Sterling finished past the Bulgarian keeper just before half-time to make it 4-0 to England before tensions flared up yet again in the stadium, with racial chants sparking up again as well as Nazi salutes from the crowd. This again caused the game to be paused, with the Bulgaria fans told by match officials that the third stoppage would result in the abandonment of the game. At half-time, Bulgaria captain Igor Popov went to the fans and pleaded with them to end the racial abuse against the England players. However, this did little to deter the Bulgaria fans, as abuse continued throughout the second half, although it wasn't as organised or vocal as before, therefore rendering the game as having the ability to continue without further stoppages by the referee. England went on to win 6-0, though the full-time result was barely mentioned in a game marred by racism. Thankfully, the fans were reprimanded by the Bulgarian FA after the match, and it was ensured that this blatant and explicit racism would never occur again. Right? Wrong. Krasimir Balakov, the coach of the Bulgarian national team, exclaimed in a post-match interview that he was not aware, nor could he hear any racist chants or actions from the Bulgarian fans. Posing a UEFA investigation into that night in Sofia, both Balakov and the head of the Bulgarian FA, Borislav Mihailov, stood down from their positions, but it was not without final comment. Balakov stated that he believed England to have a bigger problem with racism than Bulgaria, believing Bulgaria not to be a racist country. Mihailov also commented, saying there were only 4 or 5 people participating in racist chants, and that when the game was stopped the second time, he believed it was only because England manager Gareth Southgate could hear it. This just proves the inherent racism within the Bulgarian football circles, which is operating at a systematic level. In this case, it is not just the fans, but the organisation itself, which still holds heavily racist views, only worsened by the comments made by Balakov and Mihailov, belittling not just the racists, but also the experiences of black English footballers who were a victim of the racist abuse. With an indefinite break in football being declared in mid-March across Europe, and no fans being allowed into games due to the coronavirus outbreak since then, that surely wouldn't allow for enough time in the year for a major racial incident within football in 2020. Well, again, you would be sorely mistaken. On the 16th of February, in a Portuguese league match between FC Porto and Vitória Guimarães, Porto striker and Mali international Moussa Marega was physically and verbally racially abused by the Vitória fans, which resulted in his premature exit from the game itself. From the warm-up, the Vitória fans made monkey noises and racist jeers towards Marega. This is made even more abhorrent as Marega had donned the black and white of Vitória in the 2016-17 season whilst on loan from Porto, where he netted 13 goals for the club. He was continually booed and jeered throughout the game until his ultimately match-winning goal in the 91st minute, chipping the ball over Vitória keeper Renato de Jesus and into an empty net to make it 2-1 in Porto's favour on the night. Celebrating the goal, Marega defiantly pointed to the colour of his skin. This is when the situation went from bad to worse. The Vitória fans then began ripping up the seats of their own stadium and using them as projectiles to throw at the jubilant Marega, who at this stage was now celebrating with his teammates, with some even hitting him and his fellow Porto players. Marega then grabbed one of these ripped seats and held it aloft his head, in defiance to the racist actions of the fans. Though this did not subdue the Vitória fans, as their racist chants against Marega were only amplified further after his goal, and this visibly affected the Mali forward. Just 8 minutes after putting Porto in the lead, he started marching off the field, as he could take the racial abuse no longer. Several of his teammates attempted to halt his exit from the pitch, but his mind was made up. Porto manager Sergio Concheo was forced to substitute his star forward in the 71st minute as the racial abuse intensified, with Marega leaving the field of play. He was escorted down the tunnel by Porto staff, with Marega holding out 2 middle fingers as a parting gift for the Vitória fans. With an incident like this occurring in Portuguese football, one must assume that Vitória would face major repercussions for facilitating and harbouring racist abuse within its fanbase. Again, you would not be further from the truth. Vitória were fined a mere €714 by the Portuguese League for racially abusing Marega, with no further consequences such as fan or stadium bans. Marega responded to this meagre fine, ironically offering to pay the fine for the club. This is not the only eye-opening response to the racial abuse of Marega, as was the statements of Portuguese politician André Ventura. He stated that, whether there were racist attitudes towards Marega or if Marega had provoked the Vitória supporters, we have to condemn the two. Yes, he partially blamed Marega for his own racial abuse. The main Vitória fan group also came out and defended the racial abuse of him, stating that Marega provoked the attack with his celebration. The 3 instances investigated in this video across a timeline of 3 years are not uncommon occurrences. Racism to this day is still commonplace within the game I love, and it manifests itself within different areas of the game, whether that be player recruitment, punditry, fan groups, or an issue that has recently been raised by Raheem Sterling, lack of racial diversity within football coaching and within the boardroom. More simply, more must be done by the likes of the Premier League and other top European divisions to end racial discrimination within their leagues, as their actions sets the tone for the smaller associations, not just across Europe, but globally. Small steps have been made with the recent campaigns by the likes of the Bundesliga and the Premier League, but there is still a long way to go if we are to rid our game of racist behaviour. It is unfortunate that it may not be in my lifetime that we finally cut out this cancerous racism within football. But I do believe that with acknowledgement followed by action, we can rid our game of this racism once and for all.